All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the USC Trojans entered this college football season with some questions that needed to be answered. Would their defense improve after being one of the worst in the nation a year ago? Would Lincoln Riley get that marquee win with the Trojans? How would USC transition to life in the Big Ten Conference? And how would the men of Troy replace quarterback Caleb Williams? Well, so far, so good for USC in this college football season, as the men of Troy definitely appear to be headed in the right direction. SC got the 27-20 win last night over LSU in Las Vegas, and they looked like a much different and a much improved team from last season. It was a bend but don't break effort for this USC defense last night, as yes, they did give up 421 yards to the Bayou Bengals, but they didn't break in the end zone. And of course, the big part of that, early on in this game in the first quarter, we saw SC stop LSU on a goal to goal situation on four downs and gave up 0 points in the process. You look at the quarterback, and of course, we saw Miller Moss, have limited action in his first 2 years at USC. Of course, he had that big time Holiday Bowl performance last year in relief of Caleb Williams or substituting for Caleb Williams at that point. But nonetheless, you look at Miller Moss last night, 27 of 36 passing for 378 with a touchdown pass, leading USC on two touchdown drives in the fourth quarter. And the bottom line is this: you saw Miller Moss play last night, and I know that he's been in Lincoln Riley's system for a couple of years now, but this guy was unfazed. And I know that some people could have said, well, maybe the bowl game, we was kind of still skeptical about it. But anybody who wanted to be possibly skeptical after Miller Moss's bowl game performance, you just look at that, what he did last night against an LSU team, a nationally ranked team on the big time stage. And the bottom line is this young man was unfazed out there, especially in the fourth quarter when it was money time, when USC needed him to step up. He led the Trojans on that touchdown drive to take the lead late in the fourth quarter, 20-17. LSU came back and tied it up. And then he made the key passes coming down the stretch. He was calm, cool, and collected in that pocket throughout the contest last night, even when the LSU rush was on him. And I think that is definitely a step in the right direction. It's going to be a very positive tone, if you will, for this entire team for the upcoming season. For me, I do truly believe this was a statement win for Lincoln Riley and USC, because this was a darn good LSU team. And granted that Los Angeles is a lot closer to Las Vegas than Baton Rouge is, but there was a lot of purple and gold in that crowd last night in favor of LSU. And at times it could have sounded like a road game for USC, but nonetheless, the men of Troy were well represented. They have a very big fan base on the West Coast, and still they went out there and they handled their business against a team that is nationally ranked. For me, USC came into the season ranked 23rd. I felt that was extremely low for them. When I did my top 25, I had USC much higher. I actually had USC ahead of LSU in the rankings. I really thought that Lincoln Riley was bringing some talent back. But for me, one of the biggest acquisitions for USC this offseason didn't come in the transfer portal. It came by them being able to get Danton Lynn, the defensive coordinator, to leave UCLA to come to USC. And I think already in game one, we saw a big time difference with USC last night. A lot of those goal line situations for LSU last night would have been touchdowns last year against this USC defense. We saw them create pressure. We saw them put the heat on LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier at times. We saw them speed him up. And we saw USC come up with the big stops when they needed to, for the most part, on third down. And I think that is going to be a step in the right direction. It is a step in the right direction, but it's going to be a building block rather for this team as the year progresses. It's one of those where, for the flip side for LSU, of course, they're going to look back at this game and they're going to see some big mistakes that they made. Of course, you cannot overlook the 10 penalties for 99 yards to begin with. And of course, some huge penalties. We saw Kyron Lacey get an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after he scored the game tying touchdown in the first half. And that good field position that USC subsequently got off of that resulted in a field goal. And then, of course, on the game winning drive, safety Jordan Gilbert being assessed for targeting and then, of course, being ejected. And then the ball was already inside the 30-yard line for USC. And then, of course, the half the distance to the goal penalty put USC, in terrific scoring position. And of course, a lot of people at that point thought that SC was probably just going to try to position themselves to go out there and get a better spot for their kicker. But you know what? Woody Marks was like, no, not on my watch. And even as you watch that play break down, I think some of the LSU guys thought that USC was probably going to just try to get better position for the field goal. And by the time they realized it, guess what? The fight song for USC was on. And at that point, really, the game was out of reach. But also for LSU, this is the third year in a row that Brian Kelly and his Tigers begin the season by losing to a ranked opponent from a power conference on a neutral field. For 2 years, it was Florida State. And this time around, it's USC. And clearly, Brian Kelly was not thrilled about the loss. But nonetheless, I think that his Bayou Bengals, are in a very good spot. Of course, like I said the other day, the additional spots now in the college football playoff give teams more wiggle room, but you got to still go out there and handle your business. Yes, it's a loss. Yes, it's a loss to a ranked opponent, but you still have an opportunity if you're Louisiana State, tribute to Vern Lundquist, by going out there and taking care of your business in the Southeastern Conference. So for LSU, they've got Nicholls State this weekend, this Saturday at home. They should take care of their business there. They'll be heavily favored. Their first conference game is in 2 weeks at South Carolina. And then they turn around and host another Big Ten school. Got to get accustomed to saying that, but they will host UCLA. And then you look at that back end of that LSU schedule. That's going to be very telling from the middle of October on at Arkansas, at Texas A&M. They're off for a week before they host Alabama, at Florida. They get Vanderbilt at home, and then they finish up at home with new SEC member Oklahoma. So I still think that if you're LSU, you still have some positives to take away from this game. Garrett Nussmeier was 28 of 39 passing for 304 with 2 touchdown passes. And of course, that interception, which sealed the game late. Granted, we saw the talent of Kyron Lacey on display, 7 catches for 94 yards. And just like USC, LSU needed to improve on defense as they were one of the worst in the nation in that category last year as well. LSU was getting to the football a lot better than they were last year. So again, that has to be a step in the right direction. And again, like I said, there are positives if you're LSU to build off of. But if you're USC, you've got to have a ton of confidence coming out of this game because from a lot of different standpoints, the Miller Moss aspect, of course, that young man played good last night. You look at the running ability of Woody Marks, the big catch by Kyron Hudson early on. All of your receivers stepped up because you had a lot of talent to replace. And it's one of those things we know in the Lincoln Riley system. It's all about speed at the skill positions. He can coach that. And you figure the state of California is a hotbed for that talent. And USC does have that talent. But it came down to the defense. And honestly, I don't feel, bad about saying what I'm about to say, but I haven't seen USC look that good defensively against a power team probably since the days of Pete Carroll. Okay, this defense is still a work in progress. Don't get me wrong, but I liked how they had a get after them attitude. Going after LSU, and like I said, the bend but don't break philosophy worked out big for the men of Troy. And if you're USC, like I said before, you've got to feel good about this one. You took care of your business against LSU. You've got Utah State out of the Mountain West at home. And then you've got the big test in a couple of weeks when you travel to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. I think the Michigan game and the Penn State game are going to be very telling for USC this season. And I think, I always, even in the preseason, I had them right there among the top tier teams in the Big Ten to begin with. And now, if you're SC, now you're going to say, hey, you know what? Let's make that push to try to get to the Big Ten championship game, possibly win it. They definitely have a shot to get to the college football playoff. And I think this win against a ranked opponent from a power conference is definitely going to help them. LSU is not going anywhere, meaning they're not going away. This team, is going to be ranked for this season, and I think that is definitely going to help USC's chances going forward. But nonetheless, big time spark for the men of Troy on the Vegas Strip. And if you're Lincoln Riley and company, you've got a lot of positives to build off of today as you start to get into this college football season. Step one, USC looks like a much different and much improved team from the end of last season. Offensively, they're good hands with Miller Moss. Defensively, they look like a different club under Danton Lynn. And I think the men of Troy will definitely have an impact this year in the Big Ten. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.